Hey, hi friends, welcome to the B.SCIT MACIT question and answer series. Myself Guru, and yes, today we are going to see the topic from a B.SCIT question paper, that is stating the 4 important features of a constructor and also listing the various types of constructors. So this was the same question was asked in B.SCIT March 2009 for 4 marks. So it is very important question for getting 4 marks in exam. So if you guys have any doubts or any queries regarding this topic, okay, you can mail me on my email ID, that is gurumatrix2004@gmail.com. If you want to know more about the .NET related technologies, then do visit this site, that is www.questpon.com. So let's continue with our session now. So now let's see the important features of a constructor. Let's understand what is a constructor first, then we will see the 4 types of constructors in C#. So let me just open up my notepad. Okay friends, first before we get started with the topic, let's understand what is a constructor basically. So what is a constructor? So what is a constructor? Constructors are methods used in a class. Yes, so they are the methods used in a class and they get called automatically when we create object of the class. So when a class is using a constructor, okay, and when we create object of that class, then the constructor of that class will get called automatically. So this is the key benefit of using a constructor. Let's suppose if you want to initialize any variable in a class, okay, so when we create an object, okay, if you want to initialize any variable, any variable in a class, then the constructor is the right way to initialize the variable before that object is get in use. So when we create an object, if you want to do any kind of pre-initialization, then the constructor is the right way to go ahead. Okay, so this is the key benefit of using a constructor. If you want to do any kind of pre-initialization, if you want that your object should go in a proper initialization way, okay, then the constructor is the right way. So if you want to do any kind of pre-initialization like we do in a SQL connection, suppose I think you all do that pre-initialization. You all must have seen the pre-initialization when we pass the SQL connection string. This is my connection string, suppose my string obj equal to new see, this is how we initialize our SQL connection object. Without the connection string, we cannot create the object of the SQL connection. So it means this SQL connection must be having a constructor, and that constructor is ensuring that whenever an SQL connection object is been created, it should go with the proper initialization. The use of that SQL connection the use of the object of the SQL connection should go with the proper initialization way only, and that constructor is taking care of. Means the constructor get called automatically. Okay, you don't need to call the constructor get called automatically. Whenever you create a constructor in a class, it get called automatically. Okay, if you want to do any kind of pre-initialization process like SQL connection is doing, means whenever an object is created of the SQL connection, it needs a SQL connection string. It means a pre-initialization process, it means a SQL connection class needs a connection string, so that this initialization process is taking care of the constructor. So it means the constructors are very important in our program. They ensures that our object goes in a proper initialization way only. So if you guys want to do any kind of pre-initialization process, if you want to give some value to your class variables during your object creation, then go with the constructor. Okay, let me just show you how the constructor is created. For example, we have a class CLS employee. I'm just showing you the syntax of a constructor. Just see. Now to create the constructor, it's pretty simple, just see the class name, just copy the class name. You can use any access modifier. You can use either private or public. So I am going to use public. So I am going to use the same class name, open and close round braces and a curly braces. Remember, constructors don't have any return type, so you cannot give any kind of data type here. You cannot assign any kind of data type. Okay, but yes, you can pass the parameters like this: int I, int y, string x. You can pass any kind of parameters. So yes, constructor don't have any kind of return types, but yes, you can pass the parameters as an input parameter. You can pass. So let's suppose if you have private variable here, private int code. Okay, this is your private variable, and you want to assign a private variable with a value during the initialization process. Then you can do like this, equal to, and this I value you can pass by using the object like this: CLS employee obj is my object, equal to new CLS employee equal to 10. This is my code. This 10 is nothing but the input parameter of I, and this I will assign that 10 value to the code, and that private variable you can use inside the class to do the manipulation. So this is the use of a constructor. As you can see that the constructor name is same as the class name. Okay, but the constructor don't have any kind of return types, so don't use any data types here. Just simply use a modifier, access modifier, plus the class name, open and close. You can pass the input parameters, and you can do manipulation inside the constructor. So this is all about the constructors. There are different types of constructor. So we have seen what is a constructor, we have understood the use of constructor. Okay, the use of the constructor is, it's pretty simple, as I already told you, that it ensures that the object will go in a proper initialization way only. That is the right way. If you want to do any kind of initialization before the object in use come in use, then use the constructors, because they get called automatically. Now let's see the various types of constructors. So let's see the types of constructor in C#. So the types of constructors in C# are default constructor, parameterized constructor, copy constructor, static constructor, and private constructor. So we will see one by one to see. Okay, so So these are the 5 types of constructor. Okay, so we will see one by one. The first one, we will see a default constructor. As the name says, a default constructor. So the demonstration of this constructor we will see in a real-time scenario by using the Visual Studio 2010, you know, ultimate edition. So let me create a console application project. By using the console application project, I am going to demonstrate default constructor example, you know. So let me just create console application. Let me just give the nice name constructor. As you can see on my right hand side, my language is Visual C# and my framework is 4.0. So Visual Studio 2010 is creating the environment for me. So now my environment is been created with some default libraries, as you can see, and with a nice namespace and a class program which is having a static void main method. So now we will see our first constructor, that is default constructor. Friends, as you can see, you know, as the name implies, default constructor, so it is a default constructor. So simply we need to create a class and we need to create a constructor with no parameters, you know, so let me just create a public class here, public class CLS employee, and my public int EMPL code value is 0. And now I'm going to create a simple default constructor, public CLS employee, and I'm going to give a new value to my variable, public variable employee code. Let's say 9. Okay, now I'm going to create a method. Now I'm going to create an object in this main method, that is CLS employee equal to new CLS employee. Okay, now I'm going to print the value of the public variable, that is console.writeLine print value is obj dot employee code. So as I told you, the constructor get called automatically, so you don't need to call anything, you just create the object, the constructor will be fired automatically. So let's see that whether my default constructor is getting fired or not. So let me run the program. To run the program, I'm going to use the keys as console.writeLine, control F5. So as you can see that my print value is 9. See, okay, so let me just show you again. You need to go to the debug, start without debugging. As you can see that my print value is 9. Initially when I created the variable, I have assigned the value 0, but my constructor value inside the constructor I have assigned the value as 9 here, you know. So when I created the object here in my main method of a program, you know, the constructor get called automatically. So it is proven that constructor get called automatically. Okay, so this is a default constructor get called automatically when I have created the object. Okay, so my variable got initialized from 0 to 9 automatically. Okay, so as you can see that my print value is 9. So this is the experiment of a default constructor. So we have done the default constructor, we have seen the default constructor. Now let's see another constructor, that is parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor, as the name says, the constructor, okay, the constructor which is having one or more parameter, input parameters, that type of constructor is known as parameterized constructor. Okay, the constructor which is having parameters, the input parameters, known as parameterized constructor. As you can see the same example, you know, in the previous example we did for the default constructor. Okay, so now let's make this default constructor as a parameterized constructor by passing some values. So I will pass this 9 by as an input parameter. So let me just say int I. Now this constructor is become my parameterized constructor because it's taking the input parameter, because it is with the input parameter. Now what I will do here also, you know, as you can see that automatically the prompt has been shown by the Visual Studio IntelliSense that the constructor does not contain a constructor that takes a 0 argument. So we need to pass our argument now, so that's why it is showing an error. So I will pass 9 here. Okay, now I am going to run this program. Yes, as you can see my print value is 9. So my parameterized constructor is been fired successfully. So what I did, from changing my default constructor to the parameterized constructor, I just passed the parameter, that is integer I. Okay, and then assigning the same I variable to the employee code and then printing the value. So friends, this is all about the parameter constructor, parameterized constructor. The constructor which is having an input parameters is known as parameterized constructor. Now the third constructor, let's see that, the copy constructor. So let's see the copy constructor. So before we get started with the copy constructor example, let's understand what is a copy constructor basically. So my friends, a constructor which contains a parameter of the same type, of the same class type, that type of constructor is known as copy constructor. Copy constructor enables you to copy stored in the object of member variables. Okay, the data which is stored in the member variables of an object, you know, that data you can copy into the another object of the variables. Yes, you can copy the data of the one object into the another object by using the copy constructor. I will just show you the syntax and the usage of copy constructor. Let me just show you the syntax of a copy constructor. Now what I will do, I will create some more variables here now. That is public string employee name is equal to quest pawn. Okay, and EMPL name. As I already told you, in a class we can have overloaded constructors also, so there is no problem. So here I am going to pass a string here, quest pawn. Okay, so I am done with my parameterized constructor. Now I am going to create a copy constructor. Public CLS employee, the constructor which contain the parameter of the same type, same class type, that type of constructor is known as copy constructor. What do you mean by that? Does the same parameter, same type? Yes, I am going to use here, see, as a parameter. As a parameter I am using the same class type. So now this type of constructor becomes a copy constructor. So I will say employee code equal to, I will say obj dot employee code, employee name is equal to obj dot employee name. So now I am going to create another object here, that is of CLS employee obj2 is equal to new CLS employee. Now if I open the round braces, just see what happens. Now the IntelliSense is showing me the two types of constructors, as you can see. The first with the two input parameters, that is integer and string, that is my parameterized constructor. Now the first one is my copy constructor. Just see this. Okay, so by default both are showing here. So now what I will do, here I will pass obj, the first object of a class. The first object I am passing to my copy constructor here. Now let me just print the value. I am going to print both the object values, object 1 and object 2 together. Let's see whether our copy constructor has copied all the values of object 1 or not. Now below 1 is the object 2, which is just copied the values from object 1, as you can see here. And this is the normal object using the parameterized constructor, and this is using the copy constructor, the object 2. Now I am going to print the value. Let's see. See my friends, both the object values are showing the same. See, print value is 9, the print value is correspond, So the below one, object 2, also showing the 9 and correspond, So it means we have successfully copied all the values of the data stored in the object 1 to the object 2 by using the copy constructor. So this is the usage of copy constructor. We can copy all the values of the object 1 into the new object. Now that we have understood the copy constructor, the parameterized constructor, the default constructor, now let's go and see the static constructor. Static constructor, as the name says, the constructor should have a static keyword. So let's create a static constructor. The one more point, the static constructor should be parameterless. It should not have any kind of parameter. So let me just create a static constructor first using the static keyword CLS employee. See, I will just show you what I mean by parameterless. See, if I put any kind of parameter here, just see what happens. Let me just build this. See, Static constructor must be parameterless. Yes, it should not have any parameters. So yes, so we can declare the static constructor by using the static keyword, and in the static constructor, in the scope of the static constructor, we can use only the static variables. We cannot use the normal variables, this one. So if I try to use the normal variables like this, just see what happens. My code equal to 1. If I try to use the normal variables, just see. Let me just build this again. Let me just show you the error. Just see. So in a static constructor, we can only use the static variables, and the static constructor should be parameterless. Okay, and static constructor get called once only for any number of object is been created in a program. If you create object 1, object 2, any number of object you create of this class which is having the static constructor, but the static constructor get fired only once during the first initialization process only. During the second initialization process, it does not get fired. I will show you how. Now let me just create, let me prove that. So for that I will create a public static variable empl counter. I will put this as 0, and here I am going to use my static variable to increment it. Okay, now here I am going to print my print counter, that is I am going to print the counter, and again I am going to print the counter value, and the object I am going to take it here. So that after printing the counter, again I have created the object. So let's see whether it is getting increment or not. So our default value is 0. So let's see what will be the output. Let's print it. See, as you can see that my print counter is 1, and again when I have created the object 2, again my print counter is 1 only. As you can see that the static constructor fires only once. Now what I will do, I will put a breakpoint. I will just show you by using the breakpoint. See, it is got fired here, as you can see. The first constructor to fire is the static constructor only. See, so as you can see that only once only the static constructor get fired. It doesn't fire during the second initialization process, that is this object creation process. So this is about the static constructor. Now private constructor, it is pretty simple. The class which is having the private constructor, we cannot create the object of that class. The class which contains the private constructor, we cannot create the object. Let me just show you what I mean by that. Just see, private. Now it will give me the errors of this object creation. let me remove this. See, so when we have a private constructor in our class, we cannot create the object of that particular class due to its protection level. Okay, so then we need to use the static variable like this. We should remove all this. If you want to access that particular class variables, then you need to make your variables as a static, then only you can get access of variable values. So see, by using the object I cannot get the access of the employee counter variable, but yes, if I make that employee counter variable to the static, then possibly I can access by using the class name. So I'm going to print, this is just an idea, counter value is CLS employee dot employee counter means if a class is having the private constructor, then I'm just showing you how to access the variables, the member variables of that particular class. By making the static you can access those variables. Just see, the print value will be 1, will be 0. Okay, so basically this is all about the private constructor. So this is all about the private constructor. As you can see that we cannot create the object of a class if that class is having the private constructor, and yes, we cannot get access of the member variables if the constructor is private. Okay, obviously we cannot create the object only, then how can we access? If you want to access still, then make your variables, the member variables, to the static, then only you can access those variables. Okay, so if I make this as 9 and let me remove this, and if I'm printing, see, it will print the value as 9. Okay, so this is all about the constructors and the types of constructors. Now you have understood what is a constructor. The constructor get called automatically. The name of the constructor is same as the class name. Okay, the constructor can be a default constructor, constructor can be a parameterized constructor. The constructor can help you to copy the data of one object into the another object. A constructor can be a static constructor. Okay, then you need to use only the static variables inside that constructor, and that constructor will get called only once during the first initialization process. And if you create a second time object of the same class, then it won't get called private constructor. Yes, if that class is having the private constructor, we cannot create the object of that particular class. But yes, if you want to access the variables, then you need to convert those variables into the static variables, then only you can get access. So this is all about the constructors and the types of constructors in C#. So this question was asked in March 2009 for 4 marks in a B.SCIT question paper. So it is very important question. Hope you understood this topic. If you still have any doubts or any queries, you can mail me. You can feel free to mail me on gurumatrix2004@gmail.com. Do visit this website. This website relates to all about the .NET related information. that is www.questpond.com. Here you can find all the videos on C#, .NET, object-oriented programming, WCF, WPF, Silverlight, you know, and many more. Okay, so friends, thank you very much. Thanks a lot.